For most people, it's probably going to make sense to find a GC, vet them, get references at least on the first couple, and then you may decide to bring on kind of some on in-house labor, some in-house employees, and then it's kind of up to you which direction you choose to scale.
Welcome to the Good Stewards Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to seasoned real estate investors who want to maximize the cash flow potential in their business. We are buy and hold investors with 1,000+ properties and markets across the U.S. who bring an insider's view into the nitty-gritty details of real estate investing. If you're looking to develop the mindset, teams, and systems that can dramatically build your real estate business and net worth, you're in the right place.
Welcome to this episode of the Good Stewards Podcast. I'm Ryan Dossie.
I'm Amanda Perkins.
And I'm Bill Sirius.
And I'm Andrew Sirius.
On today's episode, we're going to dive into the second R of the BRRRR strategy, how to manage the renovation, oversee contractors, employees, kind of the differences. I'm really excited about this particular episode just because all of us on here have kind of done this different ways. So you're going to kind of get a good overview from should you have people on staff, should you just see your projects to try to save a couple grand, or should you hire a GC to kind of oversee the whole thing? But before we dive right in, we do want to connect with you. So be sure to visit us at thegoodstewards.com, subscribe to the podcast, make sure you snag your free copy of our ebook, Don't Make a Profit, Create a Fortune. Now, for starters on this, I think the second R, the rehab part of this, is probably where most BRRRR deals go south. And what I mean by that is you have a property that you end up with too much money into that you're not able to get all of it out. So this is kind of the pivotal point if you're doing the BRRRR model that you really want to make sure you have this dialed in. I think it was Andrew's quote of, I've never met an investor who budgeted too much for their rehab.
I think that's everyone's quote, more or less. But
I think the danger with this is you really have two options. If you didn't budget well enough, you either go over budget or you under rehab your property. And then at that point, you kind of have something that's like halfway done or corners were cut, and it's just not going to be the best product to keep and add to your portfolio. So I know with us in particular, we've chosen to go kind of the hiring a GC route, primarily because it's enabled us to scale. There's definitely challenges with this. Like we have fired subs off of some of our projects. You do a walkthrough on something and it's like, why is the paint like running down the wall? Like I don't want them working on our jobs. So, you still have to manage your GCs. I think a lot of people make the mistake of like, well, I hired them, it's their responsibility. And then they just kind of go like hands off. And that's not really how it works. Like they're there to manage the subs. You're there to manage them and make sure that you're getting the level of finish and kind of quality that you're looking for. It gets, I think, it's a little easier on the accounting side because you pretty much have scope of work, a bid outlined, the vendor you did the work for, and they get 1099 for it. You don't have a whole bunch of like receipts from Lowe's or Home Depot or trying to remember like, okay, did this go to that project or that project? So, I definitely think I like the ease of it, but actually recommend any new investors that are listening to this. It really doesn't make sense for you to try to GC your own project right out of the get-go or bring on kind of in-house labor. It's something you're probably going to want to look at more as you scale. You've got enough on your plate. You have enough moving pieces here without trying to juggle, when do appliances get delivered, and that kind of stuff.
And one of the things is it's a lot easier to get rid of a contractor than it is to get rid of an employee. You just don't call them again. And so I think that kind of comes into play too, especially if you don't have enough work for an employee on a consistent basis. It's kind of weird to hire one too. So yeah, I would agree with that right off the bat. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I think most investors really, it doesn't make sense for them to even have a construction type employee till they're turning like a project a month or a project a quarter. If maybe you just have one guy doing kind of jack of all trades, everything, but that sounds like it would just destroy you on holding costs. I will say one kind of way we hacked this in Indianapolis, we got to the point where we realized we needed a maintenance guy. in order to continue to provide our residents with the level of service that we wanted, but we didn't really have enough maintenance calls for it. So what we found is our GC actually was billing us at somewhat of a premium for things like tear out, simply because they didn't want to do it. They're having to bring in outside people to do it. So what we did, we actually brought on a maintenance guy and made one of his responsibilities doing kind of the tear out work. So the savings on what our GC was billing us alone has paid for that employee, and we've got somebody around on call, 40 hours a week to handle any of our maintenance requests. It's kind of a good way to get what we needed without having to spend money that we didn't really have for something that we didn't have full-time usage for. Now, Amanda, I'm going to kind of loop you in here because you're who I call when I mess up. When I have a like, hey, I budgeted 30,000 and it's 37. What do we do? So as more of the kind of CFO involved in kind of the financial back end of this, how do you typically handle this when it's, should we even do this work? Do we set priorities? Where do we get extra funds from if we don't personally have them liquid? Why don't you dive
Sure.
into that?
And so, with some of it, overage is inevitable. So hopefully there's been some budget for it. There's some things that you get into a project and you're like, oh, it would be really cool if we added this other bathroom and, put in this sliding glass door out to the back deck. That would make this a much nicer house. Okay, well, the cost of that's going to be $20,000. Am I adding $20,000 of value by adding that to the project? Maybe. An extra bathroom? Sure. But, so some of that you just have to make the call. What's the margin in the project? Some things come up that you didn't budget for. Oh no, the HVAC system's bad. We had it looked at. It seemed like it was going to be okay. This happened. You can't really not replace some things, systems in houses you have to fix. So, it's just like, okay, well, $5,000 we're going to add to the budget. Hopefully, hopefully the appraisal will come through good, through at the end. Maybe that can be accounted for in budget. Sometimes it's just not a perfect strategy. Sometimes you just end up with a little more into the property than you anticipated. And at that point, you have to make your own decision. Are we keeping this? Is it, is this something that we can cash flow out our cash into the property in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Are we okay with that? Or maybe we should sell this property so that we don't have to leave, a big chunk of our own cash that we can't get into it. It's sort of a case by case decision, really kind of, like how much over did we go and are we okay with it? Because in the long run, that HVAC system that you didn't budget for is probably going to last you 15 years, hopefully. That's something that you were going to have to pay for at some point into the life of it. So, like something like that it shouldn't be something that precludes you from holding the property because that's something that you were going to have to pay for anyway. So that, that's just something that we have to deal with as we go along. Overage is inevitable. It's really just a matter of what are you going to do with it on this case? We've definitely had projects where we've ended up 100% in of the appraised value. And, again, like, okay, well, it makes really good cash flow. We think we're going to hold it for this long. We're okay with it. We just have to make those decisions as they come up.
So you made 2 points that I want to make sure people really, really, really grasped because I think they're absolutely golden. First one being, what is the ROI on the extra stuff that's coming up, or on the, you open up a wall and there's mold and you couldn't have seen it. You've got to deal with it. But I feel like a lot of the times investors get into this, like, well, if this was my house, I'd love like transom lighting. They get into this stuff that just like, that's not really ever going to pay you back. So I think looking at what is the ROI, a good example for me personally that comes to mind, Bill and I have got a 5 unit that we were wrapping up and we realized, it'd be really cool if we could actually have laundry in the units. I think that's going to attract a nicer resident pool as well as increase rents, cap rate, all that good stuff. So I think it was like a $12,000-$13,000 change order, but we're going to be able to proportionately charge significantly higher rent. So it was kind of like a no-brainer. The second one being, you may start a project and think this is a BRRRR deal, or even this is a wholesale deal, or this is a flip. And you may get into it and realize, actually, that's not necessarily the best option with this. And I think that's one of the real perks of, having people around you that are in this industry that you can talk to. Like the four of us that run this podcast are on calls with each other pretty much weekly, going through just different things. But sometimes you can get too close to a project and like, no, this is a BRRRR deal. I'm going to keep this one. It's a BRRRR deal. And stuff goes sideways on it. You make a couple mistakes and it's actually like, we owe too much on this thing. We need to just cut bait and move on. We learned lessons from it. Great. Or it may be like, I'm not, we over rehabbed it. So let's try to retail it. So, really just to highlight those 2 points one more time. First off, we have, what is the ROI of anything extra we're deciding to add? Second, it's okay to cut bait. And actually a third one that you threw out that I think was absolutely gold is, you want to do these big ticket items on the front end and have budgeted for them. That way it doesn't come out of your cash flow, further down the road. I feel like a lot of people, they'll buy a house and it's like, well, the furnace is 13 years old, but still keeps the place warm. And it's like, do you want to do that now? Or do you want to do that 2 years from now and have it eat up a significant part of your cash flow? If you've already budgeted for it now, you might as well just knock it out. Andrew, let's pass to you. I know you guys kind of went in-house, then kind of went back to GCs. You've got a little bit of a mix. So what are you guys doing?
Yeah, we oscillated back and forth. We had our struggles with GCs, and so we went to employees, and then we had bigger struggles with employees, so we went back to GCs. Now we have one crew on staff. We have a maintenance staff, and we have one construction crew on staff, and then we have mostly GCs. We like the construction crew because it gives us a little more flexibility. Like, we bounce them around. Like, they're good. They're good at everything. They're really talented guys.
Are they for more like turns?
No, I would not. I would try. We've used them on terms before, but it's only when we have nothing else for them to do.
Okay.
Because they're like, one of them is basically a master carpenter, and the other one is really good at pretty much everything. So like, we can send them to go to this house to put in braces in the basement, and then go to this house to fix the decks, and then go to this. We can do that kind of thing with them. Gives us a lot of flexibility. General contractors or subcontractors or whatnot generally don't have as much flexibility. It's harder to send them to one thing, do this little job, then do this little job. If you got a lot of trust with somebody, you can ask them to just do it and then bill you. And then if they go high, you argue it, but you don't want to make a habit out of that. You want to get the bid up front. So we've still found it normally more beneficial with contractors. It's much easier to budget and also evaluate your budgets, because when employees do a job, if there are a lot of overages and extras, unless they're very carefully marking them and you have a good feel for them, it's hard to exactly budget them. Now, a contractor would send in you a change order, and then you can just kind of look at it and compare it to your budget, compared to whatever contingency or extra you added in for unforeseen things. With employees, it just becomes a mess, and you see it's like, this is how much was spent. Well, what was it spent on? It's harder to tell than with contractors.
I think with employees too, you kind of get even if it's like not conscious, they're not in a super big rush to potentially get that project done, because it's not like they've set a set cost and that's all they're going to get on that job, like a GC. So I feel like with employees, I mean, shoot, even our maintenance guys, we've run into stuff where it's like, this should not take you that long.
No, every day they spend there is just more money out of your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then also they become, they know what the quality of product is and all of that. And sometimes they might take it a little bit too far in a perfectionist way. We have a perfectionist on staff. He's amazing, again, with that, master carpenter, but we have to be careful what projects we put him on, because, we don't want to blow the budget from the beginning. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we've stressed. It's like, these are not, we want functional, nice, pleasant houses and apartments. These are not luxury things. They're
not custom homes, but they're not like, $30,000.
We don't have
Midwest
granite countertops and
Oh, I do granite though.
Well, okay.
Granite squares,
like granite slabs. I mean, you got the skylights, the bidets. the bidets. We don't generally go with bidets.
Can you imagine how gross that would be in a rental property?
I've seen bidets in
we
properties.
just pulled out somebody who made a bidet themselves, so that was
it's a custom bidet. It was a custom bidet.
It was a custom bidet, yes. But I think you've talked about this before, Andrew. The Goldilocks principle, which is, the porridge can't be too hot, it can't be too cold, it should be just right, and that's what we want either a rental to be or a product that we're going to flip.
We don't want it to be a slum. We don't want it to be luxury housing. We want it to be good. And
we want it to maximize the rent or maximize the sale price. And that's the Goldilocks principle, just right.
So I do want to just jump in on that real quick, Bill. So I mentioned we do granite. So we do on our properties what I picked up from another investor. We call it hardening. So all of our properties have pretty much the same look and feel. It's a two-tone paint scheme, vinyl plank flooring, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and can lighting. So the reason why we spend a little bit more on our properties, they're a little bit harder for them to tear up, something like carpet. But the other perk to this is people get really, really acclimated to having nice things. So in the event of an economic downturn, if you have what we have, which is kind of I'd say C+ to A- on the high end in our stuff, if you have somebody that's in one of these properties and they're used to vinyl plank and granite and stainless steel and having something that's very nice, they're going to kind of, fight and claw to stay at that level of luxury they've become accustomed to. And same thing with, super high end stuff. If somebody's used to A+, they'd be okay in one of our projects. But we find people really don't want to drop back to that slumlord property with the 80s church carpet that's been, wet cleaned 400 times. So it kind of allows us to keep, I think, our resident pool with us longer.
So if anyone hasn't picked up the subtle, subtext of what Ryan is saying here, is bidets are basically mandatory. You must protect your property.
Well, another thing about what I'm seeing recently is a lot of people want pets, more so than, say, 10 years ago. And we actually flipped over from having no pets to being totally pet friendly, only on maybe a couple properties, not so. Now, what has been a good part of that is that we've also charged a security deposit for pets and also pet rent, which is something like $50 a month, which in the end makes us more money, as we have figured it out, than the pet damage that is likely to come your way.
It is pretty inevitable.
But hard surfacing things like Ryan's talking about, putting in vinyl planking versus carpet, even though it might be more upfront, it's a better product, looks better, people like it more, but also it's more pet, shall we say,
proof.
And
pet proof,
people
than
proof,
carpet.
because honestly, we have more problems from people than pets. So
probably the most extreme example of this, and I don't think any of us has ever really tried it, but we highly recommend you don't, is flat paint, which is the worst thing that's ever existed. In my opinion. Flat paint is, it's almost incomprehensible to me how it can do this, but you cannot get any marks off of flat paint no matter how hard you try. It's just there forever.
And it also marks if a dandelion seed gets blown onto it. It's very delicate.
Yeah, it's one house we bought was there was a lady had lived there for about 40 years and smoked maybe 2 or 3 packs every day inside the house. And so, you take a picture off the wall and there's there's a stark contrast between the, kind of the dark yellow and then the light yellow where the picture was. She basically painted the entire interior of the house with her lungs. We'll call it nicotine paint.
Did you guys leave
I would
that
say
color?
Nicotine paint is one step above flat paint. And so don't ever use flat paint. No, we did not leave it. But when we were putting this stuff on the walls to remove it, it would just drizzle down. It couldn't even hear. It was nasty.
So Smoker Lung by Andrew Sirius is going to be coming to a PPG near you soon.
Yeah, it goes flat paint, then nicotine paint. Then you start getting up to eggshell and whatnot, semi-gloss or whatnot.
So Bill, you guys go more the route of almost GCing your own projects, if I'm not mistaken. You kind of have one guy that sounds like he's just an animal. I hear you talk about him pleasantly all the time. Why don't you kind of hop into Andrew went all employees, has kind of drifted back my way towards contractors. You're kind of in the middle here.
Yeah, one of the cool things I've seen over the years is raising somebody up from pretty much just a laborer to a person who has serious skills, and it's really fun to see that happen. But you need to have people who can mentor employees like that. So, we've been around for quite a while, like 3 decades. So we've kind of been there, done that, seen it all, GCs, employees in between. But and it's somewhat historically how you just organically develop. There's not really a right or wrong here. I do think Ryan is correct. As you start out, you probably ought to start out with contractors because they're going to help you learn a lot yourself. And I feel like I came from zero in terms of contracting skills. And I just hung around contractors as they took on our projects and learned a whole bunch from them. As I did, I realized we could hire employees that could do this just as well ultimately, and we'd also have a lot more control over them. Now, there's a downside and upside, of course, to everything. The downside on contractors is that they are their own business. They're not your business. They have their own business and they want to grow it. I don't blame them. But that means they're looking out for themselves first and foremost, and they're looking to the next job as soon as they get paid probably the first third on your job. They have to feed their family after all, and you probably can't provide all that they need. So that's the downside of contractors. The upside of employees is on the other hand of that, the other side of it. And they, they can become a tremendous asset team, very loyal. They can run and go do something at a moment's notice. So there's an upside and downside, and we've appreciated both of them. But one of the really neat things about employees, if they are teachable, if they are mechanically oriented, that's definitely necessary. If they want to advance themselves, if you can get some contractors, and we actually have some contractors who are full-time on our staff, and one of the functions, I don't know if they realize it, but one of the functions I see them doing is teaching and mentoring our younger guys or employees who are just learning the trade. And it's kind of cool to see our younger guys eventually move up from being laborers to actually overseeing the entire job themselves.
Well, for instance, we have somebody who started with us when he was 15 years old, and he's in his 20s now. And he was basically like, he's a pretty big guy, so he would basically haul everything for everyone,
6'7",
tear things out, and now he's kind of can be on his own. He can put in countertops. He can, put in a door. He has, some plumbing skills. He just has developed that kind of through our company.
Yeah, matter of fact, Amanda, yesterday I went to a project that he is our employee, but he's GCing, and he's got others of our employees, and he's kind of organizing the whole thing. He brought in all the materials. He has a sense of the direction of it. He's very proud of what he's doing. I'm very, celebratory and enthusiastic, and give him a lot of high fives and once in a while some correction as well. But it's it's good to see this.
So there's two things you pointed out, Bill, that I want to just make sure people grasped. First being, if you hang out around our podcast at all, one kind of recurring theme you're going to notice is we like to provide people with unexpected opportunities. That's the people that work for us, the people we connect with, and even those of you guys that are listening. A lot of the stuff we get into and dive into, like this is the stuff that most other podcasts graze over. I would really love to see anybody who's following us do the same thing in your business. Find ways you can give people unexpected opportunities and ways to advance. The other thing I want to touch on just lastly with kind of contractors versus employees, if you have a good contractor that's financially stable, they can take a decent amount of the financial risk piece off the table for you, because as long as it's outlined in the scope, they're contractually obligated to do X, Y, and Z. If they mess up something on their end, they're insulating you from that risk. Whereas with employees, you can have stuff that's like, hey, I bought the wrong materials. And any of those overages, any of those times they're running slow or they're sick or can't come to work, all those holding costs start to add up and become your responsibility. RGC, we have, you mentioned a lot of people don't have enough work to keep a GC busy full time. We're at the level here in Indianapolis where our GC pretty much exclusively works for us. And that's led to some stuff it's been a very cool, relationship. We've given him unexpected opportunities. And we've also had jobs where he's like, hey, I should have caught this and I didn't. And it's $10,000 and I'm going to eat that cost for you. So, you're not going to get that out of a GC who if you have one that's like, hey, can I be paid in cash every Friday? That's probably not your guy.
There's definitely a flip side to it, right? I mean, like, you can have GCs eat those costs, or stomach those costs, but you can also get the GC who is basically robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so you've got situations where basically, we've had ones where we pay them and they're not doing anything on the property, and it's almost like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You kind of got to put some pressure on them. Well, they used your money to finish the last project, and now they're trying to scrum it together to finish this one.
Yep.
The big key there is well, first of all, if you're dealing with somebody in that situation, you should not continue to do so. But secondly, never. I know this is said a lot, but it just needs to be resaid. Never pay out your final payment until the project is 100% done. It's very hard to get them to come back unless they're like your go-to guy who'd come back. But it's very hard to get them to come back. And this is especially true with kind of one thing we haven't talked too much about, and I'll just briefly mention is that is this sort of the one man contractor or one or two man. It's the the handyman type, and these can be good for turnovers and small projects, and sort of they don't have they probably don't have the overhead, because one of the advantages of using employees is you save that profit margin. The profit margins, you're kind of the GC, you're overseeing your employees, unless you so you can save that profit margin. There isn't the handyman type is sort of the in-between, the closest thing to an in-between between a general contractor and an employee. And so for certain types of projects, particularly turnovers or really small rehabs,
carpet paint,
those kinds of things, handyman types are good to have. We have several contractors, we have several handymen, and we use them appropriately. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something important to touch on is where you find these guys. And I know we've hopped into it a little bit before, but I think the important thing is just to always get references. That's how I found my crew. They were working for other people on some jobs, and we kind of got a referral for a small project. And I checked with some people they'd worked with, and hey, what kind of work do they do? I was actually even able to walk a couple projects that they'd completed, and I was like, I'd be proud to call this finished product my own. And this is a level of standard I'm okay with working with. So regardless of whether you go employee, GC, or handyman type, always get and check references. And I would recommend, a couple. Keep in mind when you ask somebody for a reference, they're not going to give you the guy they screwed over. So, you want to ask things like, well, were they on time? Were they on budget? Was the property completed up to your level of standards? Was it done in the time frame you expected and they quoted? Were there any change orders? Because if they start to be like, well, they were a little late, and they went a little over budget, you may be realizing, okay, this isn't the guy for us. Whereas, I mean, there's the gamut of this. It's just like employees. There's people that'll show up that are total rock stars, and there's people that'll begrudgingly show up to collect a check.
Would you hire this person again is a good one. And if you hear an answer like this, well, if you're okay with X, then don't. That's code for don't.
If you don't find them using your shower at the property before they go home or on the weekends.
We had an employee of one of our GCs just sleep at one of our houses. We found out that was an interesting experience. But yeah, and also I'd start them on small projects. We always start any new GC on a small project that if it goes sideways, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, we had a project with a GC we were testing out, and we came in and one of their guys was actually smoking weed inside the house while working, while on the clock. And it was like, yeah, you're done. Like you're not allowed at any of my projects ever. So guys, kind of in closing here, I think kind of the gamut we've proposed for people is kind of when you're starting, it probably makes sense unless you have like GC background just yourself, unless you're like a contractor who's moving into the investor role, which I know a lot of people doing that right now. But for most people, it's probably going to make sense to find a GC, vet them, get references at least on the first couple, and then you may decide to bring on kind of some on in-house labor, some in-house employees, and then it's kind of up to you which direction you choose to scale, because it can obviously be done both ways. For us, we like kind of we're less hands-on with assembling a million details, but then in other markets on other projects, you want to control those details and kind of run all that in-house. So I think it totally just depends which direction you want to go. I want to just thank you guys for tuning into this episode. If you kind of liked what you heard, enjoyed all of Andrew's bidet jokes, remember to like and subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you get your free copy of our ebook. Go on over to thegoodstewards.com for more info, to connect with us and submit any questions or topics that you'd like to see us talk about. We're the Good Stewards signing off. Talk to you guys soon.